My roommate begged me to come to his farm. Then I found out what his surprise was: gay love story. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy heartfelt gay love stories filled with romance, misunderstandings, and unforgettable moments, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads. It only takes a second, it's completely free, and your support helps us create more emotional and unforgettable stories like this one. We'd also love to know where you're watching from today, so leave your city or country in the comments below and say hello. We truly appreciate your support. Now, let's find out why one simple invitation to a family farm changed 2 lives forever. The worst surprises are never hidden inside boxes. They are hidden inside the people you thought you understood better than anyone else. The morning I decided to leave Chicago, my roommate asked me not to. The timing would have been funny if it had not hurt so much. I had spent 3 weeks pretending my interview in Seattle was nothing more than another email buried beneath dozens of unread messages. Every night after work, I quietly researched apartments, compared neighborhoods, and rehearsed answers for questions I hoped no one would ask, especially not Liam Brooks. Loving someone who treated you like family was exhausting because every act of kindness felt dangerously similar to hope. Liam remembered how I liked my coffee without ever asking twice. He always brought home my favorite blueberry muffins, even though he insisted blueberries tasted like disappointment. When winter arrived, he silently replaced the worn tires on my old car because he worried about icy roads more than I did. None of those things meant he loved me the way I loved him. They only meant he was Liam. Kind. Thoughtful. Infuriatingly impossible to stop caring about. I had convinced myself that moving across the country was the healthiest decision I could make. Distance could succeed where self-control had failed. I was folding clothes into a suitcase while Liam finished washing breakfast dishes when he suddenly walked into my room carrying 2 travel mugs of coffee. He leaned against the doorway and studied me for several seconds before speaking. "Do you have plans this weekend?" he asked. "Nothing important." That was technically true. I had planned to spend the weekend pretending my entire future was not about to change. "Come home with me." I looked up. Chicago is already home. He smiled patiently. "You know what I mean. Your family's farm?" He nodded. "Please." That single word caught me completely off guard. Liam never begged for anything. If the ceiling leaked, he climbed onto the roof. If the refrigerator stopped working, he fixed it before calling anyone. Asking for help was almost against his nature. "What happened?" I asked. "Is everybody okay?" "Everyone is fine." "Then why do you suddenly need me in Wisconsin?" He looked toward the apartment window before answering. "Because there is something I want you to see." That sounds mysterious. It is supposed to. I laughed quietly. "You are terrible at being mysterious." "Probably." His smile softened into something more thoughtful. "But this matters." I wanted to tell him I could not go because I had an interview that might completely change my life. Instead, I found myself saying, "How long?" 4 or 5 days. That is a lot longer than a weekend. "I know. You are really not going to tell me what this surprise is?" "No, not even one hint. If I give you a hint, you will guess the ending." "You have far too much confidence in my detective skills." "Actually, I have experience watching you overthink everything." I rolled my eyes. "That is fair." We agreed to leave after lunch. While Liam loaded bags into the living room, I walked into his bedroom looking for the phone charger he always borrowed and conveniently forgot to return. His travel bag rested open across the bed beside neatly folded clothes, work boots, and a denim jacket. I reached toward the nightstand for the charger, accidentally nudging the edge of the suitcase. Something small slid out from beneath a folded shirt and landed softly against the mattress. A black velvet ring box. I stared at it without breathing. My pulse suddenly became louder than the traffic outside our apartment window. Before I could think, Liam appeared behind me carrying another stack of clothes. His expression changed the instant he noticed where my eyes had settled. Without saying a word, he quickly picked up the velvet box, slipped it into the inside pocket of his bag, and forced a nervous smile that looked completely unlike him. "You are still coming with me?" he asked quietly, "right?" The drive from Chicago to rural Wisconsin took a little more than 3 hours, and every mile gave my imagination another chance to invent a future I did not want to believe. Liam drove with one hand resting casually on the steering wheel while old country songs played softly through the truck speakers. I spent most of the trip pretending to admire endless cornfields and quiet back roads when I was really replaying the image of that black velvet box over and over again. Every time I almost convinced myself it could be something ordinary, I remembered how quickly Liam had hidden it. "You have been unusually quiet," he said without taking his eyes off the road. "I am appreciating the scenery. You have counted at least 50 cows." 57. He laughed. "That is oddly specific. I got bored after the first 20. The conversation felt comfortably familiar, exactly the way it always had between us." Liam reached into the center console and handed me a paper bag. "Breakfast part 2, he said. Inside were 2 blueberry muffins. I looked at him and smiled despite everything racing through my mind. "You still insist you do not like blueberries?" He shrugged. "I like seeing you happy." The words slipped out so naturally that I wondered whether he realized how dangerous they sounded to someone already hopelessly in love with him. Before I could answer, he turned the music up slightly and started humming along, completely unaware that my heart had forgotten how to beat at a normal speed again. By early afternoon, we turned onto a long gravel road lined with towering maple trees. Beyond them stood the Brooks family farm, stretching across gentle green hills beneath a bright summer sky. A white farmhouse overlooked endless rows of apple trees while a classic red barn stood proudly nearby. Wooden fences surrounded open pastures, and the entire property looked like the kind of place people painted on postcards when they wanted to describe home. Liam slowed the truck and smiled quietly. "Welcome." Before the engine had even stopped, the front door swung open. A cheerful woman hurried across the porch and hugged Liam before turning toward me with the warmest smile I had ever seen. "You must be Ethan," she said. "I am Hannah." Liam's older sister welcomed me like family instead of a guest. Their grandfather shook my hand with surprising strength. 2 younger cousins waved excitedly from the porch steps, and even an old golden retriever decided I was worth following around the yard. Everyone already knew my name. Everyone seemed genuinely happy that I had come. It should have made me feel comfortable. Instead, it made me wonder how often Liam talked about me when I was not around. After dinner, I noticed details that refused to leave my mind. Fresh wildflowers decorated every table. White string lights hung across the porch railing even though no holiday was approaching. A long wooden table had been placed beneath the old oak tree overlooking the orchard. Whenever I entered a room, conversations paused for the briefest moment before continuing. More than once I caught Hannah exchanging quiet smiles with Liam while their grandfather nodded approvingly. Finally, while clearing the dishes, Hannah casually said, "Everything is ready for tomorrow." Liam glanced toward me before answering. "Almost." Hannah smiled. "Tomorrow changes everything." Nobody explained what she meant. Nobody seemed interested in explaining anything. As the evening breeze drifted through the open windows carrying the scent of apples and fresh-cut grass, my eyes wandered toward the staircase leading to Liam's room, where his travel bag still rested with the velvet box hidden inside. Watching his family move around the farmhouse with quiet excitement, I became more convinced than ever that I had traveled hundreds of miles only to witness the happiest day of Liam's life with someone else, and I was terrified that I already knew exactly what surprise tomorrow was waiting to reveal. That night, the peaceful farmhouse became even quieter as gentle rain began tapping against the roof. The distant sounds of crickets disappeared beneath the steady rhythm of falling water, and for the first time since arriving in Wisconsin, I realized how different silence could feel outside a city. There were no passing trains, no traffic, no apartment walls filled with unfamiliar voices. There was only the orchard, the rain, and far too much time to think. I was unpacking my overnight bag when Liam appeared at the bedroom door, looking slightly embarrassed. "I have good news and bad news," he said. "The good news first. You get the comfortable side of the bed. And the bad news? The guest room roof started leaking again during the last storm. The repairs are not finished yet." I looked at him for a second before smiling. "So we are sharing your old room. Unless you would rather sleep on Grandpa's recliner. How comfortable is it?" "According to Grandpa, it is better than any hotel. Grandpa also believes black coffee can solve emotional problems." Liam laughed. "That is also true." His childhood bedroom was warm and simple, with one full-sized bed beneath a wide window overlooking endless rows of apple trees. Old baseball trophies rested beside engineering books on wooden shelves, family photographs covered one wall, and a faded guitar leaned quietly in the corner. Every object seemed to tell another chapter of Liam's life long before we had ever met. "I need to help Hannah secure a few things before the rain gets heavier," Liam said as he grabbed a flashlight from the dresser. "I will only be gone a few minutes. Take your time. Do not go through my embarrassing childhood drawings. I make no promises." He smiled and disappeared downstairs. For a while I simply looked around the room, imagining a younger version of Liam growing up here. Then my attention drifted toward an old cedar chest sitting beneath the window. The lid had not closed completely. Curiosity quietly defeated good manners. I lifted it just enough to peek inside. At first I found ordinary keepsakes from childhood. Old baseball tickets, camp photographs, scout patches. Then something caught my eye. A small plastic dinosaur with one missing leg. I immediately recognized it. 2 summers earlier, I had won it from a claw machine after wasting almost $20 because Liam kept insisting I could grab it if I tried one more time. I reached farther into the chest. Beneath the small souvenirs rested a bundle of photographs tied together with a blue ribbon. The first photograph showed me asleep on our apartment couch with a sketchbook balanced across my chest. The next captured me laughing while unsuccessfully attempting to flip pancakes one Sunday morning. Another showed me watering the tiny plants on our apartment balcony during the first warm day of spring. None of the photographs looked posed. Every one had been taken during completely ordinary moments when I never realized Liam was watching. Beneath the photographs lay folded movie tickets, coffee shop receipts with little doodles I had absent-mindedly drawn, an old transit pass I thought I had lost years ago, and even the paper bracelet from a small neighborhood art festival we had attended together. It felt as though Liam had quietly preserved pieces of my everyday life without ever telling me. My heart raced as I carefully unfolded one final sheet of paper resting at the bottom of the chest. It was a detailed miniature floor plan for a building labeled Community Art Studio. Attached beside it was a handwritten note in Liam's familiar handwriting. "Someday." Before I could read anything else, the bedroom door slowly opened. Liam stood frozen in the doorway, rain still clinging to his jacket, his eyes immediately finding the photographs and the blueprint in my trembling hands. Neither of us spoke. After what felt like an eternity, he slowly stepped inside, closed the door behind him, and whispered with quiet regret, "I was hoping you would learn about all of this tomorrow, not like this." For several long seconds, neither of us moved. The photographs rested in my hands while the folded blueprint lay across the cedar chest between us. Liam looked at everything I had discovered before finally letting out a slow, defeated breath. "I was trying to surprise you," he said quietly, "not confuse you." I searched his face for answers, but every answer only seemed to create another question. "Why do you have all of this?" I asked. He glanced down at the photographs with an embarrassed smile that barely appeared before fading again. "Because some moments deserve to be remembered." He carefully picked up the small plastic dinosaur from the chest and turned it over in his fingers. "You probably forgot about this. I thought I lost it." "You did." He smiled softly. "I found it in the apartment parking lot the day after we went to the arcade." He returned it to the chest beside the movie tickets, coffee receipts, and little pieces of our ordinary life that I had never realized meant anything to him. Every time we did something that made you genuinely happy, I wanted to keep a reminder. My heartbeat became almost painfully loud. "Liam." Before he could say anything else, thunder echoed across the countryside, and a bright flash of lightning briefly illuminated the bedroom. A moment later, Hannah called from downstairs. "Liam, we need you in the barn before the wind gets worse." He closed the cedar chest with gentle care and looked back at me. "Can we finish this conversation tomorrow?" I hesitated, then nodded once. "Okay." We hurried outside wearing light rain jackets as the storm intensified. Rain swept across the orchard while strong winds bent the tops of the apple trees. Everyone on the farm already seemed to know exactly what needed to be done. Hannah secured outdoor furniture, Grandpa Brooks checked the equipment shed, and Liam motioned for me to follow him toward the large red barn. We worked side by side, fastening loose wooden doors and moving lightweight supplies away from open entrances before the weather became worse. At one point, my boot slipped on the wet wooden floor. Before I could lose my balance, Liam caught my forearm with one steady hand and pulled me upright. We ended up standing only inches apart. Rain clung to his hair, and tiny drops rested along his eyelashes while he searched my face to make sure I was all right. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Thanks." He smiled with quiet relief before slowly letting go of my arm. The moment was interrupted by the sound of tires crunching across wet gravel outside. We both turned toward the open barn doors. A dark blue sedan pulled into the driveway and stopped beside the farmhouse. A woman wearing a navy raincoat stepped out carrying a thick leather folder beneath one arm. Hannah immediately hurried across the yard to greet her, while Grandpa removed his cap with obvious respect. Liam's expression changed the instant he saw her. The warmth disappeared from his face, replaced by calm determination mixed with nervous anticipation. I watched from inside the barn as the woman shook Hannah's hand and followed her toward the porch. Just before they disappeared into the farmhouse, I heard Hannah say clearly over the sound of the rain, "Madison, thank goodness you made it. Tomorrow everything finally becomes official." Liam quietly lowered his eyes without saying a word, and in that single moment, every fear I had been trying to ignore returned stronger than ever, convincing me once again that tomorrow was not about a dream we could share, but about a future where someone else would stand beside him instead of me. The storm disappeared before sunrise, leaving the orchard sparkling beneath thousands of tiny drops of water that reflected the early morning light. From my bedroom window, the entire farm looked peaceful again, but the knot inside my chest had only grown tighter. I kept replaying everything I had seen since arriving. The velvet ring box, the photographs, the blueprint marked someday, Madison arriving with legal papers, Hannah saying tomorrow would change everything. None of it fit together, yet somehow every piece still convinced me that I was standing only hours away from watching Liam choose a future that did not include me. Breakfast was louder than the previous evening. Hannah seemed unusually cheerful. Grandpa Brooks quietly whistled while pouring coffee, and Liam tried several times to start ordinary conversations with me. I answered politely, but my thoughts remained somewhere else entirely. Every smile around the table felt like another reminder that everyone knew the secret except me. Shortly after breakfast, Hannah asked Liam to help unload supplies near the equipment shed. Madison arrived carrying the same leather folder from the night before, and the three of them walked toward the unfinished building behind the old barn. I had no intention of following them. At least that was what I told myself. A few minutes later, I found myself walking through the orchard anyway, pretending I wanted fresh air while my curiosity quietly led me toward the open workshop. Their voices drifted through the unfinished walls before I could see anyone. Madison spoke first. "If everything is signed today, the commitment officially begins." Liam answered without hesitation. "I understand. This decision will affect the rest of your life. I already made my choice months ago." My heart sank. I remained perfectly still behind the wall, unable to convince myself to leave. Madison continued speaking. "There is still time to change your mind if you are uncertain." Liam's answer came almost immediately. "No, I have never been more certain about anything." Those words settled heavily inside me. Months ago, commitment. Official today. Every sentence strengthened the story I had been telling myself since Chicago. I quietly stepped away before anyone noticed I was there. The farther I walked into the orchard, the harder it became to breathe normally. I stopped beside one of the oldest apple trees and stared across the rolling hills where the morning sunlight painted everything in warm gold. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like the place where I finally accepted that I had mistaken kindness for love. Footsteps approached through the grass a few minutes later. I did not need to turn around to know they belonged to Liam. "I have been looking everywhere," he said gently. I forced a small smile without meeting his eyes. "Congratulations." He frowned. "For what?" "Whatever happens today." Confusion immediately crossed his face. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" I laughed softly, although there was no happiness in the sound. "You really do not have to keep protecting my feelings anymore." He took one slow step closer. "I do not understand." Finally, I looked directly at him. I saw the ring box. I heard Madison talking about commitments and signatures. "Your family keeps saying today changes everything." "I am not blind, Liam." His expression shifted from confusion to quiet disbelief. Before he could interrupt, the words I had buried for 2 years escaped on their own. "The hardest part is not that you love someone else," I whispered. "The hardest part is realizing I fell in love with you long before I understood there was never any room beside you." Liam stood completely motionless beneath the morning sun, staring at me as though the entire world had suddenly changed with a single sentence. For several long seconds, Liam did not speak. The morning breeze moved gently through the orchard while sunlight filtered between the apple trees, yet everything around us felt completely still. His eyes never left mine, and for the first time since we had become roommates, I saw genuine shock replacing his usual quiet confidence. Finally, he let out a slow breath and shook his head almost in disbelief. "Ethan," he said softly, "you think today is about me choosing someone else?" I laughed once, mostly because I no longer knew what else to do. "I found a ring box. Your family has been preparing for something all week. Madison keeps talking about commitments and signatures. You have been hiding photographs of me inside a cedar chest, and somehow that still makes less sense than everything else." Liam closed his eyes for a brief moment before looking back at me with an expression filled with equal parts affection and frustration. "You solved every clue except the mystery." Before I could respond, he gently reached for my wrist. "Come with me." We walked in silence toward the old building behind the red barn. I had noticed it several times since arriving, but never paid much attention because it looked abandoned from the outside. Liam unlocked the weathered wooden door and slowly pushed it open. Warm morning light poured through newly installed windows, revealing fresh hardwood floors, unfinished walls, stacks of lumber, paint supplies, and carefully organized construction tools. The room smelled of new wood and sawdust. In the center stood a large work table covered with architectural drawings, color samples, miniature building models, and carefully labeled folders. Liam quietly unrolled the largest blueprint across the table. At the top of the page, printed in bold letters, were the words Brooks Community Art Studio. My eyes moved across detailed floor plans showing bright classrooms, exhibition galleries, creative workshops, reading corners, storage rooms, outdoor gardens, and wide windows overlooking the orchard. Every detail felt strangely familiar. Skylights because I once said natural light inspired creativity. Large wooden work tables because I believed artists should never feel crowded. A children's classroom because I had once admitted every kid deserved a place to create regardless of money. "You remember all of that?" I whispered. Liam smiled gently. "I remember almost everything you tell me." My throat tightened as I noticed another document resting beside the blueprints. Across the cover page appeared two names: Liam Brooks, Ethan Carter, proposed co-founders. Before I could fully understand what I was seeing, Madison quietly entered carrying the same leather folder that had fueled every misunderstanding inside my head. She smiled warmly when she saw me standing beside the plans. "Perfect," she said. "Now that Ethan finally knows why he is here, we can go through the proposed partnership documents together." I stared at her in complete confusion. "Partnership?" Madison nodded. "This studio has never been intended for Liam alone." She opened the folder and turned the first page toward me. "Everything has been drafted with both of you as equal partners because Liam insisted from the very beginning that this dream belonged to both of you." I slowly looked back at Liam. "You brought me here for this." He nodded. "Not to watch someone else become part of my future." His voice grew quieter. "I brought you because I could not imagine building mine without asking if you wanted to be part of it too." Every assumption I had carried from Chicago began collapsing at once, replaced by something even more overwhelming. Yet before I could answer, my eyes drifted toward the familiar black velvet box resting quietly beside the blueprints, and I realized there was still one secret Liam had not explained. My eyes remained fixed on the velvet box while Madison quietly stepped back toward the doorway, giving us the privacy neither of us realized we needed. Liam noticed where I was looking and slowly picked up the small box from the table. Instead of opening it immediately, he held it carefully in both hands, as though it carried something far more valuable than jewelry. "This," he said softly, "is the last misunderstanding." He opened the lid and turned it toward me. Inside rested a simple gold wedding band, worn smooth by decades of daily use. It was beautiful because it had clearly lived a real life instead of sitting inside a display case. "It belonged to my father," Liam continued. "He wore it every day until the week he passed away." I looked from the ring back to Liam, suddenly realizing how completely wrong I had been. "You were never planning to propose to anyone," I whispered. A gentle smile crossed his face. "No." I let out a slow breath that felt like it had been trapped inside me ever since leaving Chicago. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. The silence between us no longer felt painful. It felt fragile. I looked down at the old wedding band resting inside the velvet box before meeting Liam's eyes again. I spent 2 years convincing myself you would never look at me the way I looked at you. His smile faded. I know. You knew? I hoped. The answer stole every remaining thought from my mind. Liam stepped closer, slowly enough to give me every chance to walk away. I kept waiting for the right moment, he admitted. Every time I almost told you how I felt, something happened. Work, life, my dad, the farm. Then it became harder because I couldn't imagine losing what we already had. I laughed quietly through the tears gathering in my eyes. So instead we both suffered in complete silence. He nodded once. Seems that way. I looked at him for a long moment before asking the question I should have asked years ago. So, if I had never accepted that interview, I still would have asked you to come here. If I had never found the ring box, I still would have shown you the studio. And if I had never confessed, this time Liam didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached up and gently brushed a tear from my cheek with the back of his fingers. I would have confessed first. Everything inside me finally stopped fighting. Before I even realized I was moving, I closed the small distance between us and wrapped my arms around him. For one terrified heartbeat, I wondered whether I had misunderstood everything again. Then Liam hugged me back. Not carefully, not hesitantly, completely. I buried my face against his shoulder as months of fear, loneliness, and hope quietly disappeared. I love you, I whispered. The words were almost lost beneath my breathing. Liam held me a little tighter. I know. He smiled against my hair. And I have loved you for much longer than I was brave enough to admit. Neither of us hurried to let go. Outside, the orchard remained perfectly still beneath the morning sunlight. For the first time since we had met, home no longer felt like a place. It felt like the person standing in my arms. Madison returned to the table carrying several financial reports and placed them beside the blueprints. The warmth in the room shifted as she opened the first folder. There is something both of you need to know before anyone signs anything, she said calmly. This project is ready, but the farm is not. Liam lowered his eyes, already knowing what she was about to explain. Madison turned the papers toward me. Detailed financial statements, loan balances, and repayment schedules filled every page. After Liam's father passed away, the family borrowed against the farm several times to keep everything operating, she explained. They have reached the final extension. Unless a long-term solution is approved, the property could be placed into foreclosure proceedings. My chest tightened as I looked at Liam. Why did you never tell me? He answered quietly. Because I never wanted you to come here feeling responsible for fixing my life. I remembered the interview waiting for me in Seattle and the generous signing bonus attached to the position if everything went well. The numbers in front of me quickly connected themselves inside my head. The signing bonus could cover most of this, I said before thinking twice. Liam immediately shook his head. No, at least let me finish. I already know what you are offering. His voice remained gentle but completely certain. You have your own future waiting for you. Money can be earned again. Dreams cannot always be rebuilt. I looked directly at him. You would do exactly the same thing for me. He smiled sadly. Yes, and I would still tell you not to sacrifice your future for mine. The room became quiet again. I understood what he meant, yet I also understood something else. Every blueprint on the table, every photograph inside the cedar chest, every tiny keepsake Liam had saved over the years proved he had already invested part of his future in me long before either of us admitted what we felt. I slowly closed the financial folder and looked back at the detailed plans for the community art studio. Then maybe we are asking the wrong question, I said. Madison raised an eyebrow with quiet curiosity. Instead of asking how one person saves this farm, I continued, maybe we should ask how an entire community builds something worth saving. Liam searched my face as hope slowly replaced exhaustion in his eyes, and for the first time since I arrived in Wisconsin, I saw him believe that tomorrow might become something completely different than either of us had imagined. The idea spread across the farmhouse faster than any of us expected. At first, it was only a conversation around the old wooden kitchen table. Then Hannah called a few neighbors she trusted. Grandpa Brooks contacted longtime friends who had worked beside him during harvest seasons for decades. Madison reached out to local organizations that had previously expressed interest in supporting educational projects. By the end of the afternoon, What had started as one impossible dream suddenly belonged to far more people than just Liam and me. I opened my laptop and began designing the fastest campaign of my career. Instead of focusing on saving a farm, we focused on building a future. We shared the vision of a community art studio where children could learn without worrying whether their families could afford lessons, where local artists could teach, where exhibitions, workshops, and seasonal festivals could bring people together. The orchard became more than farmland. It became the heart of the story. Liam stood beside me the entire time, answering questions about construction plans while I refined illustrations, layouts, and presentation materials. Every few minutes our eyes met across the table, and each time the silence between us felt lighter than before. We no longer carried misunderstandings. We carried the same goal. By the following morning, pickup trucks began arriving one after another. A retired carpenter volunteered to finish the remaining interior woodwork. A local hardware store donated paint, lighting fixtures, and tools. An elementary school art teacher offered to organize the first children's workshop if the studio opened. Several nearby farmers promised lumber and landscaping materials. Teenagers from the local high school helped clean the building site, while families planted flowers around the entrance. The unfinished studio slowly transformed into a place filled with laughter instead of uncertainty. I walked through the building carrying sketches while volunteers measured walls and assembled furniture. Every room I had imagined while talking with Liam in our Chicago apartment now existed in front of me. Large windows overlooked the apple orchard exactly as we had discussed. Spacious work tables filled the main classroom. Reading corners overlooked the gardens. Creative spaces welcomed people of every age. It no longer looked like an abandoned building waiting to disappear. It looked like a home waiting to welcome its first visitors. Late that afternoon, Madison stepped inside carrying her laptop with an expression I had not seen before. Calm optimism had replaced careful professionalism. Liam immediately looked up from installing shelving. "What happened?" he asked. Madison smiled. "The grant committee reviewed the updated proposal this morning after seeing the confirmed community support, volunteer commitments, and revised financial plan. Neither of us said a word. They approved. Conditional funding," she continued. "The bank has also agreed to extend the deadline while the final paperwork is completed because the project now demonstrates long-term sustainability." Liam closed his eyes for one brief moment before quietly laughing in disbelief. I realized it was probably the first full breath he had taken in months. Hannah hugged Grandpa. Volunteers applauded. Even people who had only met us that morning celebrated as though the victory belonged to all of them. Standing in the middle of the unfinished studio surrounded by neighbors, friends, and complete strangers working side by side, I finally understood what Liam had been trying to show me from the beginning. The greatest surprise waiting on this farm had never been hidden inside a velvet box. It had been the discovery that real dreams become possible the moment enough people choose to believe in them together. And as Liam smiled across the room at me, with quiet gratitude shining in his eyes, I knew the final chapter of our story had only just begun. Several months later, the first golden leaves of autumn drifted gently across the orchard as sunlight settled warmly over the Brooks family farm. The old building behind the barn no longer looked forgotten. Fresh white paint covered every wall, flower gardens surrounded the entrance, and wide windows reflected endless rows of apple trees stretching toward the horizon. Above the front door hung a beautifully carved wooden sign that read Brooks Community Art Studio. Children filled the classrooms with laughter, colorful paintings decorated every wall, and local artists patiently guided young hands discovering creativity for the very first time. Parents gathered beneath shaded benches outside while neighbors who had once arrived carrying lumber and paint now smiled proudly as they watched the dream become real. It no longer belonged to Liam or me alone. It belonged to everyone who had chosen hope over fear. A few weeks after returning to Chicago, I had completed my interview with the design company in Seattle. The position had been everything I imagined, but after many conversations, the company offered something I never expected. They agreed to a flexible hybrid schedule after my initial training period because they believed my experience leading community creative projects would strengthen their own design team. The moment I received the final agreement, I drove back to Wisconsin with the biggest smile I had worn in years. Some dreams did not ask us to choose between love and ambition. Sometimes they simply asked us to imagine a better path. On the morning of the studio's official opening, the entire town gathered beneath clear blue skies. Hannah welcomed families at the entrance, while Grandpa Brooks quietly watched children run through the gardens with tears of quiet pride shining in his eyes. Madison stood nearby speaking with community leaders, smiling as she watched months of careful planning finally become reality. I wandered through every room, touching the smooth wooden tables, the shelves filled with brushes and paints, the bright reading corner overlooking the orchard, and the gallery wall waiting for its first exhibition. Every detail reminded me of late-night conversations inside our tiny Chicago apartment when these ideas had existed only as impossible dreams. Liam found me standing beside the largest classroom window just before the opening ceremony began. Without saying anything, he reached into his jacket pocket and placed a small brass key into the palm of my hand. I looked down at it before meeting his eyes. "What is this?" I asked quietly. He smiled with the same calm warmth that had made me fall in love with him long before I admitted it. "Your key," he answered. "To the studio? To everything we built together." I closed my fingers around the cool metal, suddenly understanding that this had always been the real surprise. It had never been a proposal hidden inside a velvet box. It had never been a ceremony waiting beneath string lights. It had been trust. It had been a place where my dreams mattered as much as his. It had been a future designed carefully enough to leave room for both of us. I looked at Liam and laughed softly. "You know," I said, "for someone who claimed to have a surprise, you were terrible at explaining it." He laughed with me. I learned that lesson the hard way. As families entered the studio for the first time and children filled the rooms with excitement, Liam gently reached for my hand. I held his without hesitation, knowing neither of us had sacrificed the future we wanted. We had simply chosen to build it together. Looking around at the orchard glowing beneath the afternoon sun, the restored farmhouse, the smiling faces, and the studio filled with creativity and hope, I finally understood something I wished I had known from the beginning. Home is not the place where someone asks you to give up your dreams. Home is the place where the people who love you quietly spend years helping those dreams come true before you even realize they are building them beside you.